Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, a ridiculous neighbor invited 200 people to park on my farm property for her important business meeting. They destroyed my property and I got all of them towed. Here is what happened. The story starts like this. My whole family has been into farming for as long as I can remember. Naturally, I became a farmer too. Though things started out not as good for me and my family, we have managed to rake in a good bunch of cash over time, enough to hire some helping hands. It's nothing huge, but enough to let us have a break and relax every now and then. These workers we hired also let me finally convince my parents that it was high time that they took a breather and went on a vacation. Though of course you know how parents are, especially farmers, they thought chilling at home and keeping an eye on the livestock was the ultimate vacation plan. But I was not taking no for an answer, not when I could not even remember the last time they took a day off to spend some nice alone time. I pushed and prodded until they agreed to pack their bags and jet off to the nearby states that they've never been to. While they were off having fun at carnivals and buying each other sweets at ridiculous prices and then complaining to me about those prices, I took the time to hit up a buddy of mine who lives in a nearby state. I've been thinking over the idea of agricultural tourism for a while now, aka agritourism. Our farm's got some real charm and the barn alone is a sight to behold. I knew we could get ourselves some visitors keen on learning about agriculture and cattle. I've had this idea ever since I visited a fall festival at a farm pretty much like ours with my family. I talked to my parents about it and my dad was not on board at first, but when I told him that it was not about opening up our farm to uptight tourists, but instead giving them an experience that they might never have again and maybe making them understand how important farming is, his mind changed. Coming back to the topic, I'd been hanging out with my friend for about a week, checking the cameras from time to time and giving the workers a call to make sure everything was okay. Maybe I was being a bit too cautious and my friend kept telling me to calm down and not stress so much. I might have listened to them, except for the fact that when I decided to check the camera one last time, I saw a whole bunch of cars driving through my freshly plowed fields. There were workers around trying to avoid the incoming cars, while some of them were yelling at the people behind the wheel. Right then, my phone rang and it was one of the main workers. They filled me in on what was happening, things that I could already see on my camera feed. Additionally, I got to know that the one leading this chaos was none other than a woman I unfortunately knew all too well. You see, this woman is the Karen of our story. She is a real pain in the neck, a city person who, for reasons beyond me, decided to buy the land near my farm. And ever since she moved in, she's been bugging me non-stop about selling my own land to her. I wasted no time in telling my friend about the whole mess and hit the road. It was already midday, so roads were unfortunately packed. It took me whole 4 hours to finally roll up to my place. My worker was keeping me posted during the drive, filling me in on the ongoing disaster. According to him, there were easily over 100 cars, maybe even touching the 200 mark. Those cars had bulldozed through my fields, turning them into a muddy mess. And then to add a cherry on top, they decided to park their vehicles on my land. The cows and cattle that usually roam around freely were having a rough time too. Some were spooked beyond belief and others were limping from either getting hit by the cars or bumping into each other in all the commotion. The more I learned about the extent of Karen's insensitivity, the more I wanted to strangle that woman with my own bare hands, consequences be damned. As soon as my car hit the road, I dialed up the cops. They assured me that they would reach the farm before I did and do their best to keep the trespassers in check. Although they could not do a whole lot until I showed up. When I finally rolled up to the scene, all I could see was one huge dirty mess. My field was completely run over by tire tracks and my workers were huddled around, trying their best to save what they could. A few of my animals had been taken away to get treated for their injuries, and as if that was not enough, my farm had been transformed into a damn parking lot for the infamous Karen crew. I could hear her screeching as I approached where the police officers were. It was not just a gathering, it was more like a full-blown war zone. There had to be more than 200 of Karen's guests. Half of them looked like they could not walk a straight line, muttering and swaying even as the police tried to keep order. Almost half of these people were the same age as my parents, but you would not guess that from their fancy suits, though now wrinkled and untucked, that practically screamed, "I'm too important to care about people like you and your parents." I already knew what I wanted to do to Karen and her insensitive, annoying crew of guests, but I was so damn furious that I wanted to give them a piece of my mind before handing them over to the police. The moment the cops spotted me, they signaled Karen to step aside and walk over to me, but instead of cooperating, this Karen tried to run towards me, only to get yanked back by one of the officers. She was blabbering on, yelling a bunch of nonsense that I could not even understand. So I tuned her out and focused on the officer. "Officer, we have done our investigation and talked to your workers and Karen. She said these people are here for a business meeting, and since there was no good road to your farm where they were supposed to park their cars, they had to drive through the field. It's clear that Karen and her bunch ran over your fields illegally, and now they are treating your farm like their own and private parking spot." Me, thanks for the update. "I want to press charges, but first I want a word with Karen herself. Officer, while you talk, we can get the guests out of here. They are pretty drunk and it might take a while. Are you okay with that?" Me, "Yeah, go ahead and handle that. Also, get these cars towed off of my field." So I walked up to Karen, who was still spewing curses at me. She was belittling my status as a farmer, calling it some low-grade profession, and screaming how she could buy both me and my farm if she felt like it. Me, my property is twice the size of yours, and regardless of how low-grade you think my job is, I'm not the one in handcuffs. Who is about to be slapped with jail time? Now listen carefully, I'm gonna make sure you get the longest stay behind bars imaginable. You can sit there and reflect on just how stupid it was to mess with a farmer like me, and I'll be suing you so hard you will wish you had never even heard the word wealth. Karen was scrambling to find words, but I was not in the mood to listen. I was all about putting her in her place both figuratively and literally. Once I had said my piece, I motioned to the officer to take her away. Meanwhile, I hopped in my car and headed to the police station. I handed over all my evidence and went ahead with a lawsuit against her for damages and trespassing. I even slapped a restraining order on her just to cover all my bases. Karen was still shouting as they dragged her off to a cell, promising to see me in court. As if that was supposed to scare me. I knew the laws of this state inside and out probably better than she ever could. And I was proven right when just a few months down the line, the court ruled in my favor and Karen was ordered to pay up a hefty fine. Watching her face defeat in that courtroom was something else. My parents, who were just as mad about their hard work being disrespected, were there too. It's safe to say that Karen would think 10 times now before even imagining to mess with a farmer again. And yeah, Ripe Stars, it's good to hear that this Karen got taught a lesson by a farmer. I hope she will never mess with farmers again in the future. Either way, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post a comment. That would help me tremendously. Thank you so much. And the next one is titled, "Rich Neighbor Threatens to Kill Farmer for Not Selling His Land." Kazakhstan is not known for much, but if there's one thing that makes us stand out, is the amount of wheat we grow. Now, there are a ton of huge farming operations, but even smaller ones can cover a big amount of land. Mine is considered a smaller one, but the size equals roughly half of what a neighborhood would be. In fact, the half that is not my farm is just filled with houses for people to live in. My farm produces and distributes fairly high-quality grain and has been run by my family for many years. In fact, this farm used to belong to my grandfather, and I promised him that I would make sure he was always proud of me. That I would work hard to make the best wheat I could and make sure to keep the family name in good standing in the area. A rich man moved into the neighborhood and right away came off as acting more important than everybody else because of his money. I won't use his real name, so for this story I'm gonna call him Victor since it's a fairly common name. Anyway, Victor starts coming in and talking about starting a community organization that sounds very familiar to the HOAs in other countries. It would involve him being in charge, of course, and everybody paying him money. In return, he claims people will be safer and the community will be clean and beautiful. And by the way, guys, this whole concept of paying someone to be safer sounds an awful lot like these classic mafia movies. Maybe it's just me. Anyway, I consider my farm very separate from the housing area, and I have no reason to want to join in on Victor's idea. That idea was a problem for him because, like I said, my farm makes up about half the neighborhood. He had some takers, but unless I was gonna join in, it was never gonna work. People trusted me and felt like if I was backing out, maybe they should not be so quick to listen to Victor. Of course, he hated it, and this started many conversations I would have with the man over months. "Victor, I don't understand why you want to make things so difficult about the whole thing. Just agree to join and there will be no more issues." Me, I have no reason to join. I don't even know who you are. And you expect me to just hand over my money to you every month. Victor, I need your farm to agree to be a part of this or it will never get approved. You make up half the land. That's not fair to anybody else. Me, and it's not fair for you to come around here all the time and beg me to join when I told you no. I have work to do and your interruptions are not helping. Victor, fine. If this is about money, then we can work things out. You know that I have it and it's obvious that as a farmer, you need it. Side note, why do so many rich people think that farmers are poor? I sell a ton of wheat for good prices. Do they think that I just grow it and give it away? Me, do you think you can pay me into joining? Victor, no, I think I can buy your land and then have the majority vote. How much do you want for it? Me, I'm not selling you my farm. Do you even know the first thing about running a farm? It sounds like you know nothing. Victor, well, I would probably make more homes and just get rid of the farm actually. Okay, how about I buy half your farm? You can still live here, so that would be a big win, right? He was talking to me like I was dumb and I didn't appreciate that at all. I was not gonna sell him any of my land and told him that flat out. This did not stop him from returning though and constantly trying to buy my farm from me and getting rejected. What I did not expect was one day answering the door for him to only have the barrel of a gun pointed at me. Victor, I tried playing nice, but I've had enough of you causing me problems. Now you're gonna sell me this farm or I'm gonna pull the trigger and kill you. I've worked too hard to let some stupid farmer stand in my way. This guy was crazy, but I could tell that he had very little experience with the gun he was holding. Guns are common here with it being legal for people to own them, but that does not mean everybody knows how to use them. I had a gun of my own, but I did not even need to reach for it because of how bad his hold was. It was so far away from his body, I was able to grab it and turn it around, so I controlled it. I was tempted to shoot him, but instead I just hit him with the butt of the gun and knocked him out. The funny thing is that if he succeeded in killing me and getting rid of my farm, it would have actually ended up horrible for him. Did he ever once stop to think why the area was half farm and the rest housing? Did it even cross his mind that the people living in those homes worked and made their income from the farm? Well, yeah, most of the neighborhood worked for me, which is why they respected and wanted to follow me so badly. I called the cops on Victor, and it did not matter what he tried to say, because I had video proof of what he had done. There's no world in which you can go to somebody's store with a gun and then claim to be the victim. Victor was screwed and he knew it as soon as he was put in handcuffs and taken away. With my video proof and well-established name, it was quick for him to end up behind bars and be out of the neighborhood to everybody's enjoyment. Charged with attempted murder and harassment and found guilty of both. It really shows that just because you have a bunch of money, it does not mean that you're gonna be the most important person in the neighborhood. Generations of having a good reputation is what's gonna make people like and respect you. We never did end up getting any kind of community group, but that's because we really did not need one. We all knew each other and never had an issue until Victor came around, ironically. Either way, I just want to keep making my wheat and hope that the next person to move around here does not end up a rich dirtbag like Victor was. Or at the very least not point a gun and try to threaten my life. And the next one is an Am I the A-hole story. My wife and I went shopping and I went to a different aisle to get some beef jerky. I heard my wife scream for help, so I ran over and she was freaking out because an elderly woman hugged our son. You can tell the woman was harmless. The woman's son came along and profusely stated that she had dementia and she meant no harm and that she tends to view every child as her child. I said it was okay and I myself apologized for my wife's overreaction. During this time, I was not paying attention and my wife called 911 and called over security, and it became a huge mess for all parties because my wife was not letting the issue go. You could also tell that the son was extremely embarrassed, as was I. I was trying to relax my wife, but she was going on a complete meltdown rage, saying that this mother should be in a home if she cannot keep her hands to herself. What if she got our kid sick, tried to kidnap him, got combative and hurt him? All of which I agree are possible outcomes, but I told her none of that happened, so let's just leave it at that. Security states since the wife called the cops, we had to wait for them to show up so they can file a report as per their store policy. About 25 minutes later, police showed up and asked what happened, and my wife explained everything. You can tell the police were like, what the hell is wrong with this woman? I felt nothing but disappointment. The police took this statement and started laughing as they left. I gave the son of the elderly mom a fist bump and said sorry. My wife was upset I did not have her side. She was upset how I took the side of the son instead of her. I explained his mom was clearly sick, it was a harmless gesture, and explained that she was the one that acted unreasonably. I did acknowledge her concerns, but nothing bad happened. We could have just let it slide and went on with our day. She told me I failed as a husband. So we ran the story by our family and friends, and it's a 50-50 split. So my brother-in-law said this would be a funny story for this subreddit. So Reddit, was I the a-hole? I forgot to add, our kid is 19 months old. And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Was OP the a-hole by acting like this or not? Comment number 1, not the a-hole. Good lord, your wife's initial concern was justified, but after the situation was explained and an apology was offered, she should have dropped it. There was no reason to call 911 or even store security. You did not fail as a husband, you were acting rationally. Comment number 2, not the a-hole. It was fine for your wife to yell for help and get upset when it first happened. Calling 911 and continuing to make a huge deal of it after the son explained the dementia was just out of line and definitely a huge overreaction. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. Father had always been a polite and kind-hearted man, but he is as sharp as a tack and you should watch out for him. I could never get away with anything when I was a teenager. One of my favorite stories to tell about him is the time that he got his ultimate revenge on this douche lawyer from the city. It started with our hometown forming a public national park next to our property. I will admit that I love the park and walk there frequently. It helped raise our property value a ton as well. Dad and I had always used it as our form of bonding and therapy before it was an actual park, and would often go fishing at the large lake that exists a few miles north of the park. Our very long driveway runs about 10 or 12 yards in front of the park entrance. A few feet on the other side of the driveway is a ravine and then our fields. The city carved out a little gravel parking area, maybe 100 yards from the entrance. For most people, this is enough, and you know, they are there to exercise, so what is wrong with walking a little further to get to the entrance? Well, one day, some fancy pants sporty convertibles started showing up parked in our driveway. I guess to be exact, half of it was. But still, Dad could not get his tractor around it one day because it would roll into the ravine. It ended up costing him almost an entire day's work, and when it comes to farming, that is a big frickin' deal. Dad lingered near the vehicle for over 2 hours waiting for the man to come back. He was really polite about it. I remember being about 15 and sitting in the tractor watching and listening to the conversation.
I can park wherever I want,
he said with an arrogant tone. Let's call this guy Jerk.
Now I'm going to need you to get away from my car. I'm sure it's worth more than your house.
He climbed into his convertible over the door like an a-hole, trying to look cool, and started it up, putting on his sunglasses, and peeled out so fast it sent gravel flying and hitting Dad and the tractor. I could see Dad fighting the urge to get upset, readjusting his head calmly after being pelted by rocks. My father was not used to being blatantly disrespected by men like that. In our small town, people are generally kind and good to each other, especially the farmers. However, not this guy. He is not from here, we can tell. Turns out we were right. The car was back the following week. After discreetly inspecting the license plate, which was hotshot, I was able to see what county the vehicle was registered in, which was a bigger city not too far outside of our town. When the car was parked in our driveway a second time in 1 week, Dad was pretty pissed. He really needed to accomplish his work today, or he would end up behind for the first time ever in his farming career. The jerk seemed to take hours to return to his car that day. When he finally did get there, he seemed absolutely irritated that we were waiting for him.
What are you doing by my car again?
He ran up to it and started inspecting the paint job for any marks or dents. Sir, I need you to please stop parking in my driveway. I need to get past you, and when you park here I cannot, said my father, but the jerk cut him off.
I don't care what you say, I can park here if I want to.
He opens the door and gets into the car the normal way this time.
Now please, would you kindly F off and leave me alone about it before I sue you?
He peeled out again, throwing rocks onto us and the tractor. Father was red in the face and shaking. Let's get back to work. He just wanted to carry on and forget about it. The summer ended and I was going back to school, so I could not help Dad with farm work anymore. One day when I was on the bus on the way home, I looked behind us to see Jerk in his sports car with a very pretty woman. She was beautiful with long blonde hair that whipped around as the wind from the convertible caught it. She was laughing as the douche man must have made terrible jokes. It was obvious that they were headed towards the park/my house. When I got off the bus, he was pulling up behind me, skipping the usual parking spaces and headed down our driveway. I stood in his way and refused to move, making him stop the car.
Get out of the way, you little jerk!
He yelled, earning him a strange look from his female passenger. I just stood there staring at him. He threw his car in park and got out. As he walked up to me aggressively, I was not quite sure what he was going to do. He got close to my face, as close as he could because he was shorter than me, even at 15 years old.
I already told your dad that I would sue him if you guys kept this up. In case you couldn't tell, I'm a pretty successful lawyer, and it would not be anything for me to take your old man to court. And now move.
He gets back into his car and we stare each other down for another 30 seconds or so before I decide to head back to the house. So, he is some hotshot lawyer, huh? I started looking into this. I hop on the internet. Yeah, I'm not that old. The internet and Facebook were a pretty established thing when I was 15, and start looking at lawyers in the city where he is from. It took a while and I had to sacrifice some important homework time, but I managed to pull it off. His name was Martin Hotshot Thompson, and I suppose he was a little bit of a big deal as far as lawyers are concerned in a somewhat big city. Either way, he is still a douchebag. Something else I discovered was that the pretty blonde woman he was with today was not his wife. Ha! I think this is some important info to keep in my back pocket. Another day or two passes and Martin Hotshot Thompson shows up again in our driveway. He is alone this time though. Right before Jerk showed up, we had a big truck show up to pick up a bunch of cow crap. Yeah, we also have cows on top of crops. A few times a year, Dad made a pretty good profit off of cow poop since people like to use it for fertilizer. The problem that comes from Jerk showing up after the truck came is that this truck full of poop cannot get around his pretty little sports car now. The driver walked to the back of the house to tell us that he could not get past the vehicle parked on the side of the driveway. Dad had known this guy for a few years now, and I would say they are kind of friends. He tells his buddies about the BS that Hotshot had put him through, and he chuckles and asks Dad if he is interested in getting some payback. Dad and the driver head back down the gravel driveway and put their revenge plan in motion. The truck was pretty full of manure, maybe a little too much, so we shook quite a bit of the overflow on top of the convertible. Even with how little the amount appeared coming out of the truck, once it was in the car, it seemed to fill it up in a hurry. We all laughed till our sides hurt and waited for the man to return to his vehicle. The amount of drama that followed was truly hilarious. Hotshot's face was well worth all of it too. His eyes nearly bugged out of his head when he saw all the cow poop in his car. The fact that we are all sitting there laughing was even better. He fumed and screamed a bunch of hardly understandable curse words. When he opened the car door, tons of manure fell out onto his nice running shoes. Dad was nearly crying with laughter, casually pulled an old gardening trowel out of his back pocket and handed it to him. Here, you can borrow a shovel. The three of us howled with laughter again, and Jerk smacked the trowel onto the ground. He took a moment to hand scoop mounds of it out of the driver's seat so he could peel out like usual. We did not hear from Jerk until about a week later when he showed up again. This time Dad was not home and the a-hole was waiting in the driveway when I got off the bus. He had a yellow folder of papers. He handed me the folder saying that these were for my father, that he was suing us for dumping all that poop onto his car. I see that you got it cleaned up just fine, I said, clearly making an observation.
What do you care? Make sure your dad gets though.
I cut him off rudely like he did with my dad. I'm not giving him anything. You wanna know why? I saw you with that pretty blonde lady, but I figured out that's not your wife. He was clearly surprised.
How do you know?
He started saying, his eyes big with shock. I'm a kid with internet access. It's not that hard to figure out when you have a Facebook, stupid. I handed him his folder of papers back and turned on my heel and walked up the driveway towards my house. Proud as hell of myself, to be honest. Hotshot got in his sports car and drove away that day, never coming back. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.